Hello, this is Schism. I got a 2,500 point battle report. My Demons versus Skaven. This list you're about to see was a list that was taken to the 2015 TempleCon and finished second overall, and he won Best General with this list. This was a practice game leading up to that tournament, so here we go. On the far right side here, he's got a Doom Wheel. To the left of that, he's got 40 Slaves. To the left of that, he has 40 Storm Vermin. He has a Warlord in that unit on a Bonebreaker. He's rocking the Dragon Helm, Talisman of Preservation, Sword of Might, others, Trickster's Shard, and a Shield. To the left of that unit, he's got a unit of 30 or so slaves. Behind that unit is a unit of clan rats. In that unit of clan rats, he has a BSB, who's got a halberd and a lodestone. He's got a level 2 warlock, rocking the Ruby Ring of Ruin and a condenser. For spells, he rolled up Howling Warp Gale and Warp Lightning. Also in that unit, he has another warlord, his general. He's on a war litter. He has a shield and a wizarding hat. And for his lore, he rolled up Shadow, which is a good lore to roll on. And he also rolled very well and got Occam's Mind Razor and Enfeebling Foe. So some strength buffs and debuffs there, always pretty handy when you're a bunch of rats. To the left of that unit, there is a Plague Furnace. On that Plague Furnace is a level 1 with an Iron Curse icon, a Scrying Stone, and a Flail. For spell, he rolled up Plague. Woohoo! Love myself some Plague. And that unit also has the Banner of Dripping Death, which happens to be the banner of my Bane. Is my Bane this game. It's actually, I was kind of impressed with the Banner of Dripping Death, but I'll get into that a little bit later. To the left of that unit, there is a Hell Pit Abomination behind the trees there. There's also a Warp Lightning Cannon behind the tower. And on his far left, he has 7 Gutter Runners with the slings and all that poison goodness on his far left flank. Again, facing off against them, I have 5 Furies with the Mark of Nurgle. To the right of that is a single Beast of Nurgle. To the right of that, there is a Soul Grinder with the Caught by the Iron Claw there. To the right of that, there is 30 some odd Plague Bearers in bus formation. To the right of that, there is a 39 Plague Bearer unit. And in that unit, there is a Herald of Nurgle. He's off here in the cards right here. I didn't put him in the unit yet, but he's going to be on the far left corner there. He is the BSB, and he has the Razor's Standard. And he also has the Locus of 5+ poison. So that unit is armor piercing and poison 5+. To the right of that unit, there is 3 Plague Drones. To the right of that, there is 5 more Furies with the Mark of Nurgle. To the right of that, there is 3 more Plague Drones. And right there in the back behind the Furies, there's my Demon Prince. He had a 50-point gift and a 25-point gift. For the 50-point gift, I rolled up his Demon Armor. Thank the Lord. So he's got a 2+ armor save, so he's at least serviceable. I don't have to worry about his every swing in combat coming at him. And he, for the second gift, I just took the Sword of Swift Slaying because ASF is very good on him. For spells, I rolled on Lore of Death. I got Soul Blight, Purple Sun, Doom and Darkness, and Curse of Lampshade. Not a bad set. I plan against Skaven. The direct damage isn't going to be too useful because I'm going to try and throw him into a unit to mulch through him, especially now that he has a 2+ armor save. I can be a little more safe. So turn 1, he angles his Doom Wheel. He doesn't want it to go too far forward since I have a lot of flyers on this side. He angles his Doom Wheel off the board edge, so he goes into the board edge, stops before he goes off. And then the rest of his army moves up relatively aggressively. His Hellput moves to the forest there and starts to peek out the other side. And his Gutter Runners move up to try and sling off my Furies. So turn 1 in his magic phase was uneventful. I was able to dispel everything that got off. However, this is where he landed his Strength 8 Warp Cannon shot. It landed right in the center of the Plague Bearers. It wounded about 16 of them. And then 13 of them decided to fail their ward saves and die turn 1. So there goes my big combat horde of Plague Bearers. It's already been reduced to a 3rd strength. And over here, the Gun Runners do some poison slings and take off one of the Furies. That's okay. My turn 2, I take a charge. I don't take any wounds from the stand and shoot, which is quite fortuitous. And I get into combat with these rats here. And on the far right flank, I move up my Demon Prince over the other side of the building. I don't want to get too close because I don't want to worry. I don't want to have his Doom Wheel crashing into the side of my Furies and then, overrunning into something else and just causing all sorts of chaos. So I'm very cautious on the side not to set up any cascades or at least be at least 12 inches away so that he has to roll better than normal to get into anything over here. And I inch the Furies up, the Plague Drones there up just so I don't make it too easy for him to get into them. And I also don't want the Doom Wheel to be able to zap my Demon Prince, so I make sure there's plenty of targets to absorb the lightning bolts. And then the center lines, I swift reform my Plague Bearer Horde here. There's no point in staying Horde at this point because I'm going to lose attacks right off the bat. So I just reform in a bus formation and prepare it for the long grind here. And the other unit of Plague Bearers moves up to match speed. The Soul Grinder moves all the way up to the side. That statue we're playing there is impassable terrain, so he moves up around the left flank to hopefully get into the side of his furnace and do some serious damage. Now, I know his Hell Pit is there, but since I have the Iron Claw, I don't know exactly how this combat will turn out. I know I got a 5+ ward. He's got a 4+ regen. He's strength 6, but I'm toughness 7. So I have a strength advantage because he's only toughness 5. It all depends on what he rolls for his attacks, but I'm willing to make that trade-off, at least if it ties up the Hell Pit for long enough. I would find that to be of great value while I try and deal with the rest of his army. And there you can see how he moved up on the left flank there. And my Beast of Nurgle, nervous about the combat in the left, because if I can't get past those Gunner Runners, then that Warp Cannon is going to be free to fire all game at me mercilessly. So I devote the Beast of Nurgle over here to try and help out the Furies. Hopefully the Furies will be able to last at least a turn in combat. I can get my Beast of Nurgle in there, and then I can take that side, take that Warp Cannon, and then that's one less thing I have to worry about, especially after it's showing in turn 1. So in the magic phase, I do happen to roll a 10, so my whole army gets a +1 ward. I'm not going to argue with that. I try and get off a bunch of magic. I rolled really high in my wins of magic. A 10 is pretty high, I would say. So I try and get out the lampshade on his warlord on the bone breaker there. He dispels it. I try and get off, on a couple of the other 2 spells. I think Doom and Darkness on his general unit. He dispelled it, and I tried to get off the other one, or I did. I think I ran him out. I dispelled it. So it was either between -1 strength, -1 toughness, but I don't need this turn because I don't think I'm going to be in combat. So I just go for a Purple Sun for kicks and giggles, and I get it off, and it goes 30 inches through his whole entire army. He has to take literally like 40 initiative tests, and out of all those initiative tests, he only failed 6. And 3 of them were on the slaves, and 3 of them were on the storm vermin. And then that rear unit, you can see where the template ended up, went straight through the entire bunker there. He had his general had to take a test, his BSB and his warlock. Everybody passed, and it was just really, really, really. Granted they are rats and they have good initiative. I was expecting more than 6 casualties, considering the amount of models that I managed to get the template over. It was an obscene amount of models, but he lucked out there. So in the combat here, everybody just decides to sit down and have tea because nothing happens. And he takes his turn 2, and he decides to bail out his Gutter Runners here. And he takes his Hell Pit, and he turns it, pivots it, and crashes into the side of my Beast of Nurgle because he wants to keep his Warp Lightning Cannon alive. I can't blame him there. He reforms those slaves to face off against the Soul Grinder to absorb some brutality. He takes his Plague Furnace, he crashes into my Plague Bearers. He moves up his General's Bunker, he moves up his Warlord on a Bonebreaker on the Storm Vermin, and then he moves up his slaves to block the flank charge on that unit. So hopefully he's trying to gum up my whole right flank, my Demon Prince, my Plague Drones, all that good stuff. The Doom Wheel here crashes into the Plague Drones. This could be good, this could be bad. Hopefully he doesn't get behind me because that's one of my biggest fears. And then in the magic phase, he sucks out a lot of my dice on some petty, stupid spells that I'm not really concerned about. Then he goes, whatever he has left, he casts Plague. It gets off. My hands go into my face because I know this all over again. I mean, I'm toughness 4 here, so I shouldn't be concerned too bad. But the way these unit deleting spells have been hitting me lately, I just fear the worst. And then after all is said and done, I only lose 3 Plague Bearers, so I got off the hook very, 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 very lightly there. And then he goes his Warp Lightning Cannon, and he rolls directly onto my Demon Prince, and he hits him with a Strength 8 shot, and I make my ward save. Wowzers. This was a very, very tense moment, and pretty much the whole game relied on that one die roll. And luckily I was able to pass my ward save, otherwise this could have been a relatively quick one. In the fight over here, 2 Furies take out 2 Gunnerers, and Gunnerers take out 2 in return. The combat is a tie, and we both stick around. The Helpit makes quick work of the Beast of Nurgle and just turns to face back against his original target, the Soul Grinder. In the combat here, he does no wounds to me miraculously, even with his impact hits, and I somehow do 3 wounds to him. I win this combat, and he flees, and I'm not able to run him down, so I guess I can't argue with that result. In the combat here, he does 4 wounds to me, and every combat we fight here, I lose a guy to the Banner of Dripping Death. No kidding, no lie there. It's absolutely, that thing's brutal, surprisingly. I do 2 wounds. I take probably 8 guys, however many I can put on the furnace, and I put them all on the caster there to try and get him off, because I don't want any more plague getting off, and I just don't want him alive in general. So I take all that I can, I kill him outright, and I do 1 wound on the unit. I happen to lose this combat, and I take 4 guys that just die due to my test for losing this combat. My turn 2, my plague drones charge the Doom Wheel here. He has to flee again, and I run him down. Now this is kind of an interesting situation here. My first charge with the Demon Prince onto the Skaven slaves. Now he's on his general's leadership. I believe it's 10 with a reroll on the slaves. And he fails his terror test, and then he fails his reroll on his terror test. So his slaves have to flee through his whole entire army, and then I charge it with a Soul Grinder thereafter, and then they end up where you see them there. I pass my test to redirect with a Soul Grinder, and I get into his other slave unit on the side. So that's why you see that green arrow. That's the initial. And then I charge him and redirect with a Soul Grinder, you'll see later. That's why the slaves went from one side of the board to the other. So after I charge and he failed the terror test, I passed all my tests to redirect. So the plague drones redirect into the Storm Vermin there, and my Demon Prince goes in Storm Vermin, and then my Nurgle Plague Bearers there with my BSB crash into the front. So that's looking like a very favorable combat at this point. If not for nothing else, the stomps and thunder stomps against rats should be quite tasty. And you can see the Nurgle Furies on the far right here. They fly around to taunt and tease his general's unit. And there you can see the Soul Grinder charged the fleeing Skaven slaves there, and then redirects, passes his Leadership 7 test to get into the slaves here. So in the magic phase, I managed to get Soul Blight here to add some insult to injury. In the combat here with the Soul Grinder, he does 4 wounds to the slaves, and they stick around. In the combat here, he does 4 wounds to me. I only managed to do 2 wounds against the unit. I could go for poison attacks against the furnace to try and drop it, because I'm never going to break this unit, obviously, while the furnace is in it. However, I really don't want to lose combat here again. After I don't want to take any tests that I have to, so I go after the unit. And I still lose this combat, but I don't pop any due to the leadership test. So in the combat here with his Bonebreaker unit and the Storm Vermin, I haul off and do a whopping 16 wounds on the unit. That includes the Thunderstomp. He goes and he takes out, he issues a challenge with his Bonebreaker. I accept it with my champion. So he does 3 wounds to my champion there. So a bit of overkill, and he does 1 wound on the unit. I win this combat handily, but he has an extra rank than I do, so he sticks around. The combat over here, he whiffs, and I manage to do 1 wound to him. He actually breaks, and I run him down with these last 2 Furies, so this left flank is looking good after all. His turn 3, he takes his Hellpit, and he tries to crash into the rear of my Soul Grinder, and he falls just short. So I get another turn of munching on those slaves. His slaves in the rear there that decided to flee prior rally and turn to face. His general's unit turns around. like so, and reforms. In the magic phase, he irresistibly forced enfeebling foe on my plague drones here, trying to reduce some of the incoming damage. As you can see, my demon prince cannot slide down into combat anymore. We killed enough units, so my demon prince is now out of this combat at this point. There's no way. So he doesn't have to worry about the demon prince fighting or thunder stomping. So he goes after the plague drones to try and reduce incoming damage on that flank. In the miscast, all of his wizards take a strength 6 hit. So both his warp lightning dude and his general and a war litter take a wound. And then he goes and he throws his 4 or 5 dice, something at Occam's Mind Raider to try and bail him out of this fight. And he double sixes this as well, and both his wizards take strength 6 hits yet again. And you can see his engineer is dead, and his warlord on a war litter takes another wound. His warp lightning cannon is not done yet. It goes through the plague drones here, all 3 of them, and I make 1 ward save, and the other 2 go pop. In the combat here, luckily his big furnace thing misfires and doesn't do any wounds to me. It does something, I don't remember the result, but it didn't kill me, and that's all that really matters to me. I managed to do 3 wounds to the unit. He does 2 to me, so we end up sticking around here once again. In the combat here, the Soul Grinder munches through 6 more of the slaves. They still stick around, though. In the combat in the middle, he takes his Warlord on a Bonebreaker. He directs all his attacks onto my BSB with the 5+ poison, and he expunges him from existence. The rest of his unit does 3 wounds onto my Plague Bearers. I'm rolled pretty well with my ward saves here, so it bailed me out of a really bad situation. He puts 2 wounds on the Plague Drones, and in total between both these units, I do 10 wounds to him. I have more ranks at this point. He's not, or the same amount, I believe. He's not steadfast, so he actually runs. I pursue with both. He pursues, he flees through his general's unit there in the center, and the drones complete a charge into the side of them. And my Plague Bearers just end up sniffing the Plague Drone's bum. So take it to my turn 3. My Furies charge the other flank. The Demon Prince charges the rear. Trying to do some cleanup here. Or some damage at this point. It's not quite cleanup. And the Plague Bearers reform to face the furnace here, because I'm just going to grind with this thing forever. With that furnace and my inability to wound, this unit is not going anywhere anytime soon. So now I'm going to have to divert another whole unit to try and get this thing out of my way. My Furies, they were out of the charge arc of the Warp Lightning Cannon here, so they have to set up the charge this turn, and as you can see, they're lined up for the charge next turn. In this combat here, I do a massive 16 wounds to his unit, and he does no wounds to me in return. However, he sticks around. In the combat over here, his slaves actually sneak a wound through on the Soul Grinder, and I only managed to do 4 wounds to him in return, and he sticks around yet again. The combat here, he does 2 wounds to me, I do 2 wounds to him. This is getting frustrating. That takes us to Skaven turn 4. He charges his Skaven slaves into my Furies, and his Hell Pit, as you can barely see his little claw there by the statue behind the Soul Grinder. He charges in the rear to tickle the Soul Grinder's bottom. Then the magic phase, he goes to cast Enfeebling Foe on I think it was my Plague Drones, and he miscasts yet again, and he kills his his warlord, his general, and at this point he decides to concede the game because, yeah, that's pretty grisly. So some notes here. The Warp Lightning Cannon, Jesus, man. That thing can hurl out some major damage, and it completely debilitated my horde formation first turn. Those things are always scary. I was not too happy. I didn't expect to really do much with that unit after that point. The furnace, this thing unless you're rocking some great weapons or something to deal with this thing against regular rank and file units, this thing is a nightmare. I mean, my plague bearers were stuck in this thing all game. I mean, I could have tried to 6+ poison the hell out of it, but if I don't roll those 6+ poisons, then I'm just gonna lose combat and take a metric poop ton of tests, and then I risk. The last thing I want to do is be taking, leadership tests with my demon units because I always run the risk of rolling the double sixes, and my whole 30-man block just goes bye-bye in one roll. So at that, I really was forced with I thought the decision to just go after the unit to try and get some combat res, hopefully grind them down, but it really wasn't happening. This game can be summed up by one thing and one thing only. That's that failed terror test with the Skaven slaves. Had he not failed that, he would have been able to isolate his Bonebreaker on my Herald's unit and mulch through that thing, especially with the spells he get off a Mind Razor and all that stuff. He definitely would have done some serious hurt. Put me on a break test and probably blew him up. Failing that terror test was definitely the turning point of this game because that allowed me to take my general and a unit of plague drones into the side of that unit and just completely lambaste it. So that was definitely the turning point of this game. A rerolled, failed reroll 10 test. Another thing you can chalk this game up to is more of his bad rolling more so than my good rolling or good play at all. Was his suicide with his casters. I mean, miscasting 3 times and rolling the just enough to kill your wizards every time was quite fortuitous for me and helped me out quite a bit. And then 5+ ward, how many times I can say it solves a lot of problems, no matter how hard you're getting hit. If you can roll 5+s, you can just win the game. And I made some pretty pivotal saves, especially on my demon prince, and then some of my on my units when I was taking some massive amount of damage. 5+ ward definitely solves all. My MVP for this game, I mean, this was a really tough game. I don't think any one of my units actually performed well. I think a lot of them did their job. I don't think any of them exceeded expectations. The only one I could say I could really tip my hat off was to the Furies on the left flank for chewing through those gut owners after all that and then remaining alive to cause a major amount of concerns on that flank. But other than that, I definitely have to give the MVP to the Plague Furnace. And it's not my unit, but man, that thing really shined, did its job, and took one of my whole units out of the game the whole way. And then at the end, when all said was done, I had to divert another whole block of infantry to deal with that by game's end. And even then, it would have took me a few turns to grind through it. Probably took me 6 turns, and I would have devoted 2 Plague Bearer units to it. So definitely the MVP of this game. Thank you very much, and take care.